Hello, my name is Francis Ray Jones, and I'm just going to try and share my screen first of all. Today I'm going to talk about the South Carolina EIP grant called Crop Protection and Pest Management Extension Implementation Program for South Carolina. And so this work is funded by the USDA NIFA EIP program. And so I'm Francis Ray Jones. I'm the IPM coordinator at Clemson University, and I oversee the IPM program. So I'm the PI on this grant, and I'm listing here the co-PIs: Dan Anko, Brett Blau, JC Chong, Matt Cotulli, Jeremy Green, Tony Kyneth, Dave Lemie, Juan Carlos Melgar, Mark Nettles, Ben Powell, Guido Schnabel, and Brian Ward. And I'm showing here a map of South Carolina where we are located. I am based off campus at the Clemson PD Research and Education Center in Florence. And you can see we have co-PIs across the state. In Charleston, we have a vegetable research and extension focus. In Blackville, South Carolina, more of a row crop. And on the main campus up in Greenville, we have the fruit tree research and extension faculty. In Orangeburg, we have a colleague at South Carolina State University. And where I'm located, we have turf grass ornamental as well as row crop IPM. And so the goal of the Clemson IPM program, which is funded by the EIP, is to disseminate knowledge in IPM and increase adoption of IPM practices in South Carolina. And so Jeff Zender was the IPM coordinator until 2019, and I've served in this role since then. And so if we look at the IPM work at Clemson, we do work across a range of row crops, but many vegetables, fruits, peach, blueberries, and strawberries, ornamental plants, turf grass, in addition to work in pollinator protection. And I'll be talking about all of these objectives that address these commodities today. So as IPM coordinator, my duties include facilitating stakeholder input into the IPM program, working to facilitate communication among the co-PIs and stakeholders. I also help to coordinate evaluation of the IPM programs and provide support and oversight for developing extension training programs and materials, in addition to, of course, the accounting and reporting efforts. We did hire a program assistant, Tim Bryant, in March 2020, and Tim helps really with all aspects of the IPM program, including developing IPM videos, extension publications, IPM smartphone apps, organizing the IPM forum and discussions with stakeholders, and assisting with evaluation efforts. So we do have an IPM program advisory committee, which is myself, the extension specialist, Dave Lemie, evaluation specialist, Dave Lemie, IPM project and commodity team leaders, key extension agents, including an agent at South Carolina State University, and the Clemson extension director. And we also have an annual IPM forum, and the goal really is to provide feedback and input in terms of, what are we doing? What are we doing well? Are there maybe some IPM issues that need to be more developed or addressed in the future, and so forth? So we like to have that feedback. It's a continuous effort to improve the work we're doing in IPM. So this is what the Clemson IPM website used to look like, and this is part of the work that we do is to put as much information as we can online so that our stakeholders can find as much information as possible. So we include fact sheets, we use social media, there's newsletters, production guides, and so forth. And really every few years, we've been through a redevelopment of the Clemson IPM website, and this is how it looks right now. It's a much cleaner look. And we're happy to continue, developing our web presence. We also include links to some of our smartphone apps, and I'll be talking about My IPM during this presentation. But here are two more that are very popular with our growers: a sprayer calibration app, as well as a Mix My Spray app to help optimize the use of pesticides. We also have an IPM newsletter, and this is something the Clemson IPM program initiated back in 2020, I believe, 21. And it's all online as well. It used to be a PDF newsletter, which was emailed to stakeholders. And this is an example of one of our issues back in 22. But very recently, we've transitioned to a sort of a usage of a blog online, which includes the same information that we included in our newsletters, but we're able to more rapidly update all these different articles and get them out to stakeholders as quickly as possible. We've also helped to develop some IPM videos, which are posted online on the Clemson University Extension website, which is our PSA website. And we just want to highlight some of the IPM work that we've done. And here's some examples of JC Chong, our former turf grass ornamental entomologist, who's now left Clemson. Tony Kyneth is our vegetable pathologist in Charleston, and this is Jeremy Green, one of our row crop entomologists at the Edisto Rec in Blackville, showing how to use a bead cloth to sample for insect pests in soybean. Clemson Extension has two really good publications. One is Home and Garden Information Center, and these publications are more geared toward homeowners, whereas Land Grant Press, and this is a more recent publication, this is a peer-reviewed extension publication, and this is geared more towards ag professionals in particular. And we're super excited about this publication. Having the peer review has really increased the quality of these publications. So the IPM program, Tim and I, and we work with the other co-PIs and others at Clemson to help develop these publications. And we think they're a great tool that our growers can access online. We print them out and hand them out at field days. And I'll be showing you some examples. And we have written some overviews of IPM and insecticide resistance management articles, in addition to much more focused articles on managing, for instance, cucurbit downy mildew, managing the brown stink bug in corn, for instance. And so there's a growing number of high quality extension publications that we're very excited about, and that we know that our agents and growers get a lot of information from these articles. I'm just going to show you one example here, which is stink bugs, which are major pests of many of our commodities, including in cotton. So this is one that Tim Bryant, Jeremy Green, and I worked on. And I'm just going to show you a few pages here. Really good photos. You can see, for instance, down here, these two pictures showing how to differentiate the southern green from the green stink bug, how to tell the difference between a plant feeding, a pest stink bug versus a predator, which has a much thicker mouth part, as you can see in this drawing here. And we also post much of IPM information also using social media here on Twitter, or now X. And so I provide a very brief overview of some of the efforts of the IPM program, but now I'm going to be more specific in focusing on the different objectives that were included in the 2021-2024 EIP grant. And so we've addressed three priority areas: IPM implementation in specialty crops, in agronomic crops, and finally in pollinator health. So I'm going to be going through each of these now. So first of all, in specialty crops, we have a peach IPM component where the co-PIs are Guido Schnabel, Brett Blau, and Juan Carlos Melga. And we have two objectives. The first is to assess in-season horticultural oils for insect pest management and investigate use patterns and potential synergistic effects in combination with fungicides. And so two main pests here were addressed. First of all, the San Jose scale. This has been a real challenge to control. For many years, organophosphates were used, and now it's primarily pyrethroid insecticides are used. It can cause fruit damage, leaf chlorosis, and limb death. There are some dormant oils that can be used, horticultural oils, but more research is needed in particular to see whether there's synergistic effects with fungicides, which are used quite a good bit on peach. One of the most common diseases that is targeted is brown rot, which can infect flowers that bloom. It can cause cankers on branches, and it can infect ripening fruit, leading to brown rot. So this is something that can lead to significant crop loss, and it's managed through repeated applications of fungicide. So some sort of demonstration trials were conducted with horticultural oils, and I'm going to show you first of all on the left here, there's a chart showing the number of San Jose scale crawlers in this trial, and we're comparing this to a control plots. So Captain is a fungicide, and you can see that had no effect on the scales. Adding these horticultural oils did help to reduce the number of scales, but the oil plus the fungicide, there was no synergy there, and the same level of control was achieved compared to just using the horticultural oil alone. Now, for brown rot management, you can see the fungicide Captain worked well, but adding these horticultural oils, again, there was no synergy here, and the addition of the horticultural oils was as effective as just using the fungicide alone. And at low rates, there was no significant damage due to phytotoxicity on the fruits or the leaves. There was some more work done with another fungicide, polyoxin D, plus some mineral oils. And again, the goal was to see whether there was any synergy for brown rot control. And compared to an untreated control, all of these treatments did reduce the incidence of brown rot, but adding the horticultural oil, again, didn't lead to any increase in control levels. However, there was some phytotoxicity observed with pure spray horticultural oil, with the fungicide. And this is really important information for us to get to our growers so we can, inform them in what situations a horticultural oil can help. Is there not any synergy and phytotoxicity? So these are useful IPM recommendations that were generated in this project. And the second objective in this Peach IPM component is the continued development and improvement of the MyIPM for fruit and nut pests. And this is a smartphone application that was developed by Guido Schnabel at Clemson back in 2012. When it was initially developed, it had a rather narrow focus. It was primarily for peach and strawberry growers. But with support of the Southern IPM Center and the EIP program and other funding sources, this is scope of this app has increased over the years, and you can see here on this screenshot on the right the range of pests and diseases that are addressed in this application. And it's really popular with our growers and agents, and is updated each year in a workshop which is funded by the EIP grant, where collaborators from across the Eastern US meet to improve these recommendations. And it is a regional IPM tool. It certainly isn't just for South Carolina stakeholders. As you can see on this slide on the right here, the universities that are involved and engaged in not just updating this app, but also promoting it in their states. So this has been a great success, and we're excited to continue to improve and update the contents of this application. And it includes information on pest identification, how to sample for these pests, what insecticides, fungicides to use. It's interactive. It can help with resistance management, and again, it's a great tool, and we're seeing increased numbers of users over time, and it's a free download for Android and Apple phones. So moving on now to the vegetable IPM component within the specialty crop IPM priority area. And for this, the co-PIs are Tony Kyneth, Matt Catelli, Brian Ward, as well as Mark Nettles. And I'm going to first talk about the pathology component that Tony Kyneth oversees. So part of this work is for Tony to conduct some diagnosis of key diseases of vegetables. This photo on the right was actually taken during the pandemic, where I think an agent sent some okra samples to his home, and this is Tony's cat having a good sniff at these diseased okra. And so, as part of this work that Tony has done, he identified a new pathogen on okra. This was published in Plant Health Progress. EIP support was acknowledged in this publication. And one of the conclusions in this publication was that growers throughout the southeastern US should plan to rotate fields planted to Clemson spinous okra to non-host crops for more than 2 years before cropping okra again, to reduce the likelihood that population of the pathogen will reach damaging levels. He also has conducted demonstration trials testing a rotation of azoxystrobin and mancozeb on 4 cultivars of pepper that are susceptible to anthracnose fruit rot. And he did this on bell pepper, Italian frying, and chili peppers. And on those 3 types of peppers, the fungicides were effective, but not on jalapeno. So anyway, all this helps to showcase IPM approaches to disease management to vegetable growers, which can then help to refine IPM recommendations. And the goal here is to, really optimize the use of fungicides, but also provide non-pesticide solutions by, for instance, potentially using tolerant varieties of these different crops. He also monitors sensitivity of cucurbit powdery mildew and downy mildew to fungicides. And this publication right here, again with EIP support, has shown the result is that these results can help to slow development of resistance to this fungicide by using other AIs. And this photo on the right just shows different levels of cucurbit downy mildew on cucumber. So next we're moving on to weed IPM in vegetables. And so Matt Catelli, who's based at the Coastal Rec in Charleston, he has a weed garden which he uses every year in his extension work to help stakeholders correctly identify weed species. And so county agents, growers, and also grad students use these plots every year to help identify the different weeds. And this is super important in order to be able to implement correct IPM practices. He also does demonstration trials to show herbicide symptoms so that growers can correctly identify these symptoms and how different they are from other abiotic and biotic injury on different crops. And these plots are showed at various extension agent training and field days with growers. He's also done some work looking at different sweet potato varieties, because some of these have different growth patterns In particular, there's some that can grow rapidly, have this bunch type growth where they can quickly cover the ground, and this can reduce light penetration, which can prevent or slow the development of weeds. And this is particularly important in crops, maybe in organic production, where there are very limited or no herbicides that can be used. And competition with weeds, can lead to 100% yield loss. So providing recommendations can really help to reduce the incidence of these weeds, which can be devastating for vegetable producers. And the final objective for vegetable IPM is to provide in-field training in IPM strategies for limited resource and minority farmers. And for this, we work with Mark Nettles, who is an extension agent at South Carolina State University, which is South Carolina's only public historically Black college and university. And so Mark's program focuses on limited resource and minority farmers with small diversified operations. And so Mark oversees a leafy greens project where he works with a number of growers across the state every year to showcase IPM strategies, including insect pest identification, scouting methods, and various other IPM practices. And we're excited to continue to work with Mark to provide support to his IPM programs in South Carolina. So moving on to the final commodity group within the specialty crop priority area is the turf grass ornamental IPM work with co-PIs J.C. Chong, Joe Roberts, and Steve Jeffers. Now, J.C. Chong, as I mentioned, left Clemson last year, but when he did, we had just completed his insect component of this grant. And Joe Roberts and Steve Jeffers are continuing the disease work. And the goal here was to build a website and a smartphone application with information and training on turf and ornamental crop pest management. And this is the website that is in development. It's really about to be launched. We've had some slight delay with some IT work as we've transitioned to a new type of web page. But we're really excited to launch this as it has a ton of information on different diseases and insect pests and how to manage them. It has these fact sheets on all these different pests and diseases. And this should be launched definitely this year. Again, this is something that our stakeholders have been wanting for a few years now. They want to have more information immediately available online, in addition to maybe in-person and print extension work that we do. And so we're excited that the EIP helped to fund this work. And it has a lot of information on fungicides, insecticides, what rates to use, when to use them. And the EIP program is also working with Joe Roberts and Steve Jeffers and the Southern IPM Center to initiate work on a MyIPM turf grass and ornamental smartphone application. So we're just in the process of putting this together right now, which hopefully will launch sometime maybe next year. So moving on to the next priority area is agronomic crops. The co-PIs are myself, Dan Anko, Jeremy Green, Mike Marshall, and John Mueller. So I'm going to first of all talk about some of the insect work that Jeremy Green and I have been doing as we're the two row crop entomologists at Clemson University. Jeremy's program focuses mainly on soybean and cotton IPM, and he does many demonstration trials every year. He conducts work looking at different cultural practices, such as planting date for thrips controlling cotton, how susceptible field populations are to different insecticides. Can grain sorghum be used as a trap crop for bollworm? And I was at a field day just yesterday where Jeremy emphasized the importance of scouting and how to scout in soybean. Uh, and we were talking about defoliation levels in soybean from Lepidopteran pests and how to quantify defoliation. And it's very easy to overestimate the amount of defoliation. And you can see this on this photo up here on the right. And so these are important things that we emphasize in our extension work. Jeremy also has a very popular cotton and soybean newsletter. There were 20 issues last year. There's 6 or 7 already this year at least. And this is emailed out to hundreds of stakeholders every year, and it includes really useful information on pest identification and based on what pests we're seeing at different time points during the season. He includes each week the numbers of budworm and bollworms in pheromone traps, and you can see here for 2024, this is where we are as of mid-July and how it compares to last year, for instance. So our growers get a lot of information from this newsletter. And I mentioned the thrips work that we've been doing, and our growers are using this online tool that was developed by NC State when we work with them to provide data to validate it for South Carolina, where a grower can enter a planting date of cotton in a specific field, and this tool will automatically pull weather data from the closest weather station, and using degree days, it will then use this risk index to inform a grower of a risk of significant thrips injury in cotton after planting. And in this case, it's showing the risk for 2017, color-coded from green all the way up to red, with red being more severe, and how the injury might compare to prior years. And this is a really useful tool so a grower can optimize either sampling efforts in the field or where a grower might want to use a foliar application of insecticide, depending on when a given field was planted. So we've looked on thrips at insecticides, reduced tillage. We've even looked at host plant resistance and planting dates. So we're really trying to hit the different components of an IPM program for thrips and cotton, and they are one of our major pests. They've become more of an issue in recent years as they've developed resistance to neonicotinoid seed treatments, which are the primary tool used by growers to manage them. So my program focuses more on corn and grain sorghum, and so in corn, we do demonstration trials every year with BT and non-BT hybrids. And one of the major issues we have is that our major pest, corn earworm, has developed resistance to most of the BT toxins expressed in BT corn. And this figure just shows the reduction in kernel injury in one of our BT products over time. So 100% being complete control, and we're getting close to 0 on average in some case in recent years. And so this is a big concern that we have, particularly as a single toxin, VIP3A, is currently very effective for this insect. And even though corn earworm is a minor economic pest in field corn in most years, the insect is very prolific, and after feeding on corn, it can move on to other crops such as corn, cotton and soybean. Cotton, nearly all the cotton is BT in the US, and it expresses the same or very similar BT toxins as corn. And so when we see this resistance, the selection for resistance occurring in corn, it is having impacts on management of this pest in cotton. So we strongly emphasize the value of planting non-BT refuge in corn. The number one economic pest, though, in field corn is stink bugs. And when they feed, they can be pests at different time points in the season. When they feed on the developing ear right before tasseling, it can lead to these crooked ears. We call them banana ears. And we've done some work in the past couple of years, some cage studies here at the PDREC showing the yield loss, and how the yield loss varies at different densities of stink bugs. We also emphasize the importance of identifying pests the different stink bug species in corn. For instance, the spine soldier bug is a predator, and even though it looks fairly similar to the brown stink bug, it's important for scouts and growers to be able to tell the difference. And the two main pests in field corn are southern green stink bug and brown stink bug. And here are the different life stages. And again, we've included these in publications, online and print, and in our field days and grower meetings. And stink bugs in corn can be a problem from emergence up to V6 at the seedling stage. Feeding can even kill a plant or lead to stunting and excessive tillering. Right before tasseling, this is when you see the most common, curved ears like we see on this photo below. And at the reproductive stages, they're less of a problem as they're taking out really one kernel at a time, as opposed to at the seeding stage, when we can have deformed plants and even plant death. And so we published several publications. This is an example of a land-grant press article with our different thresholds. A colleague at North Carolina State University, Dominic Reisig, and I, we worked on this scouting guide for stink bugs in field corn in the southeastern US. And they can be particularly difficult to scout for, as they can be concealed, behind the leaves, at the base of the plant in the soil. And so we provide good recommendations here on how best to scout for this insect pest. And of course, these are things that we talk about at field days in corn, and in this case, this is a sorghum field day. And for a number of years, we really focused a lot on sugarcane aphid, an invasive pest which first showed up in South Carolina in 2013, 2014. And we've looked at host plant resistance, biocontrol, insecticides, cultural practices, and host plant resistance in particular is key for this pest, as we used to plant, many of our varieties used to be highly susceptible to sugarcane aphid damage. Now, fortunately, many of the varieties that are planted are a lot more tolerant. And as a result of the planting of these more resistant varieties, in addition to probably natural enemies catching up, the insect is less of a problem now than it was just a few years ago. So moving on now to weed management in row crops. Mike Marshall is our wheat scientist, and his program emphasizes resistance management, in particular for some of our main weed species, what rotations to use, and other cultural practices to manage weeds. And he publishes a number of extension articles each year on how best to manage weeds in soybeans, cotton, and peanuts. And of course, his work has emphasized, resistance in Palmer amaranth to a number of different modes of action. And unfortunately, of course, resistance is fairly widespread to some of these insecticides. And so his program is important to provide recommendations to our growers in these different row crops. So John Mueller does work in a nematode IPM. Again, I had a field day just yesterday down in Blackville where he was talking about his work. And he's done many demonstration trials showing how best to manage nematodes in soybean, cotton, and other crops. And his work really emphasizes the importance of whole farm management of nematodes. And he's worked with the EIP program, he's worked with a number of producers and collected samples from their farms across different counties in South Carolina. And in his lab, he identifies and quantifies nematodes and then provides written reports for each field for each of these growers. This is really useful information that our growers get. And then he meets with the growers to create a whole farm nematode management recommendations that emphasize in particular correct rotation of crops, which is key for many of these species of nematodes. And Dan Anko is our peanut IPM specialist, and so he's conducted fungicide trials at the Edister Rec in Blackville. And his work has shown the importance of the use of multiple modes of action, in particular for late leaf spot management. And he's done trials both in South Carolina, and he's included samples from Tifton, Georgia as well. And he developed this visual aid in our production guides, showing how much leaf loss is too much. So he's associated these estimates of leaf loss with yield loss. So this is really important work. He's also done work looking at resistance to fungicides and cross-resistance among different fungicides with this disease. And so this is important information that he then conveys to our growers so they can select the best fungicide and do appropriate rotations of modes of action. And all this work is included in print, and of course in our production guides. But also more and more we're putting information online, including in our MyIPM for row crop app. And so there are currently there's three there's a fourth MyIPM app, MyIPM for Hawaii. The initial one was the MyIPM for fruit and nut crops that I've talked about already. There's a MyIPM for vegetables that Mississippi State is leading efforts for that app. But the South Carolina EIP initiated the MyIPM for row crops with the Southern IPM Center. So the EIP funded this app, which I'll be talking about right now. It was launched in November 2021. Initially, we started working on this as a South Carolina app, but we quickly realized the value of following the model that Guido Schnabel developed for his version of the app. And so we now include a number of collaborators from other states. And right now we have sections on insect management in corn, cotton, peanut, and sorghum, and wheat also, which is a more recent addition, as well as diseases and peanuts. And we have many active users since its launch. So if we look at where growers get information in IPM, it's of course from agents, from publications, consultants, other growers, at field days, and our production guides. And we see the MyIPM app as a supplement to our extension guides. It's not going to replace these extension guides, but we think it's a really useful supplement. So we began working in 2020 on this app. What we did, we wrote drafts of management sections for each of these pests, which we then shared with collaborators. We've asked for photos of these different insect pests and diseases. And just to show you the kind of information that can be found, this is an example for bollworm in cotton. It includes information on identification, on life cycle, on how to scout for it, and management. There's some really nice photos here of the egg, the larvae, and the adult. And then there's sections on chemical control, resistance issues, and non-chemical control as well. So it, again, shows information here on how good different BT traits are for this pest in cotton. Are there resistance issues? And what insecticides can be used and how effective are they? And this is ongoing work, and we're trying to add more information over time to make it even more useful. There's for each category, each pesticide, there are 25 categories for each trade name. So again, not all of these are populated at this time, but we're trying to add these little by little over time. There's also a really useful tool where you can search for a pesticide, either using the commercial name or the active ingredient. So if you search, for instance, for Prevathon, it will show you on what crops it can be used, for what pests and at what rates. So this is a really useful tool. As an example, for sugarcane aphids, one great thing about this app is that we can very quickly make additions. So for several years for sugarcane aphid, we just had 2 active ingredients, Transform and Savanto. But more recently, Safina was added in the app, as you can see right here. And when a user opens the app, this update is immediately sent to that user. And one of the great things about this app is that it's entirely downloaded onto a phone. So a grower or scout can be out in the field where maybe there's no connection, no connectivity, and can still have access to all the information on this app. So we think it's a great tool that can help in correctly identifying a pest, but also in choosing a pesticide or another management practice to help deal with these pests. And these are just how the interface looks like for us when we're entering information into the system. So the benefits of developing a regional IPM tool like this is that pests do not recognize state boundaries, of course. And developing a regional IPM tool is an effective use of resources. As I mentioned, the app can be fully downloaded and accessed anywhere. And the photos of the pests can help with pest ID in the field. And it's a great example of collaborative efforts among IPM programs, I think, in the region to leverage resources, including in the EIP programs. But of course, there are challenges. Recommendations, they do vary slightly across states. So we need the specialists to reach a consensus on the core recommendations for each app, even though there is room in the comments to specify if there are some key differences among states. And also the app, the structure, it's set right now, and to make any changes will require more time, effort, and funding, with working with the Southern IPM Center. But we're happy with where the app is right now, but we're certainly hoping in the future to work with the Southern IPM Center and with other EIP programs to further improve this application. And as I mentioned, these apps are available as free downloads for Apple and Android in the app stores. And I want to highlight, all the collaborators on just the row crop version of this app. You can see from all these different universities. And so we're very thankful for the time and effort that all these folks have put in addition to the support from the Southern IPM Center and the EIP, without whom, this app wouldn't be developed. So the final objective priority area in the AEP program is IPM for pollinator health. And the first objective is to develop and deliver apiculture trainings for commercial and hobby beekeepers in IPM strategies for honeybee pests and diseases. The second objective is to provide training programs to promote pollinator conservation and IPM strategies on farms, in managed forests, and around residential landscapes and across urbanized areas. So I'm just going to mention here briefly that we now have demonstration apiaries at the PD Rec, and there's others, I think, being implemented in other locations. And this is a really great tool for both research and extension. We have numerous in-service trainings, field days every year with stakeholders. We also have pollinator habitat test plots right outside my building here. And again, we've had numerous field days that Ben Powell has overseen with stakeholders, and this is really important work, and which will continue to expand with working with Ben Powell to promote practices that help to preserve our pollinators. And finally, I want to mention evaluation of IPM programs. Dave Lemie is our evaluation specialist, and we're going to continue to work with him to assess impacts of our programs, both short and long term. And we're trying to improve how we coordinate these efforts. And we've also even funded a graduate student, Jeremy Levinson, that did some work working with county agents and to develop a more comprehensive train the trainer model that emphasizes peer-to-peer interaction and feedback loops in particular. So we're excited to continue working with Dave on these kinds of approaches to hopefully improve some of our extension work. As an example, Tim Bryant, myself, colleague Dominic Reisig, NC State, we did some work, and this is from the EIP program, we did a survey of corn growers to document, their perceptions on what are some of the key pests and pest issues in field corn. And you can see here on some of the charts included in this paper, we talk about stink bugs, corn earworm, fall armyworm, salt pest, bill bugs, and so forth. And we also ask growers whether they use IPM, do they scout for these pests, why are they using, maybe high rates of a seed treatment, do they use BT trait, and if so, why, do they plant on BT refuge, and so forth. So I think there's a lot of really useful information that can come from these kinds of surveys. And what we're doing, well, what I'm trying to do is use this publication to galvanize efforts in South Carolina and the region to try and coordinate some of these kinds of surveys. And so we have some work we're doing right now to develop a cotton IPM survey similar to this one I just talked about in corn. And so we discussed this at the joint SARA 3 and NC and NSARA 222 meeting in Pensacola Beach. And we really have a lot of interest from collaborators across the Southeast and even in the Mid-South to have a common survey that we're going to hand out to cotton growers. And I think we're going to generate some really useful information from this kind of work. So with that, I want to thank NIFA for support for this program. It's the primary funding source for many of these extension IPM programs. And I'm excited to continue this program, and thanks again for the support.